Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and your lunch break, and I hope you enjoyed the morning sessions. I think we covered quite a lot in the morning sessions. You know, hearing from different car makers on some of the challenges that they face on, you know, developing their logistics, developing innovation, developing customer relationships, handling campaign issues, or as we call them, recalls. And then we heard the kind of projections. I think we've had more positive projections in the past. Maybe, you know, there was bigger growth in particular regions. It looks like it's perhaps plateauing off a little bit now. There were some projections that in the US it would start slowing down, and not shrinking, but slowing down for about 2018. And I'm not sure it hasn't already started now. But it's not, we're kind of working from good numbers. We're not at a low number, we're at high numbers, almost record numbers, so the industry is definitely not in despair. From a finished vehicle logistics perspective, we then looked at the kind of dealer experience, the customer experience, and what we can do to support the dealers, what the dealers can do to support us, how that model's changing, how important vehicle logistics is to the dealers, or perhaps up to a point not as important to the dealers as we'd like it to be, but how we can make sure that there is a better understanding of how important logistics is and how some kind of communication to work together more. But what was clear through the presentations or through the last session in particular, that there is a need to improve the use of technology and innovation to make the whole experience better, clearer. So communication to the dealer, communication from the logistics company to the car maker and the car maker back. What can we do differently? What can we do more efficiently? So this session is looking a little bit more specifically at the vehicle, I guess, logistics side of things. So we've got a great panel this afternoon, bringing different, you know, perspectives together: car makers, solution providers, technology providers, equipment providers, transportation companies. So I think there's a good mix there to talk about what's happening in finished vehicle logistics to take your industry into the next phase. Our first speaker of this afternoon is someone who is trying to look at things differently and trying to put together solutions that can help the industry change a bit. So I'd like to welcome to the podium Bill Pawluk, the CEO of CTM Worldwide. Thank you, Bill.
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Louis for the opportunity to speak to all of you once again. I've presented at these conferences many times. I'm here to share with you my vision of the future of automotive logistics from our perspective. I'm from Western Canada, had my own transport company there for multiple years, and I was able to figure out a different way of managing automotive logistics. So today's topic is designing the network. And we, once again, have a different perspective of how we should approach the network, how we should interact with the network or networks that exist out there today. This is a slide more food for thought. Does anybody in the audience know what this image represents? I stole this from another conference that I was at, and I thought it was quite fascinating, quite intriguing. Sorry, we have Japan. Anybody else with an idea what this might represent? Nobody? So I'll go with one more slide here. This might provide an additional clue. Yeah, right on. We have someone that said, yeah, it's North Korea. Yes, you're right, it is Japan, but that's North Korea. And this is a satellite image from space of what the lights look like at night over that region. And that dark area does represent a country that we all know. This is not a political statement or anything like that. This is just simply a statement that they either didn't pay their power bill, or there's a lack of collaboration perhaps, a lack of activity in the area. Or they just turn off their lights at night, I don't know. Anyhow, I'm going to go back to the topic of empty miles. Empty miles in the automotive logistics industry, conservatively speaking, around the world today, represents about a $75 billion a year annual loss. That's a significant piece of commercial business that I think is worth pursuing. Everybody's familiar with these images. Empty auto carrier assets in road, rail, and ocean all over the world. I call it the 100-year-old bad habit. And I maintain it's a bad habit simply because I believe there's a better way to do this. And I'm not criticizing anybody for the way they're doing it today, but I believe that there has to come a realization in the industry that there's new possibilities today because of technology, advancements in engineering, putting all these other pieces, these components together to do something more efficiently. Why are we doing this? I challenge anybody and everybody here, next time you're driving down any freeway, you'll see auto carriers. Count how many are full, count how many are empty. And many of you are auto carrier companies here, you already know this information, but for those of you who don't, just start counting and you'll see very quickly. The ACC declares this empty factor in North America at 42%. That's the highest empty factor of any transportation industry sector. And why are we allowing this to continue? That's my challenge to everybody. Everybody knows who this is, and I'm sure you've all heard the statement. Doing something over and over again and expecting different results, I mean, that's just simply not logical. We need to change the game. We need to change what we're doing, the methodology behind it. And there is no better time than the present. We're all actually living in good times. I remember only 5 years ago, we were talking about very different things at the Automotive Logistics conferences, where everybody's saying, oh my gosh, companies are going bankrupt, not enough business. Today, we're living in good times. And we may see some bad times ahead, and we should prepare for those. We have a good opportunity to prepare for the lean times ahead. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So anybody in the room, can anybody put up their hand if somewhere in your job description it doesn't say that you have to reduce cost, improve efficiency and quality? Anybody have a job description that does not include these factors? And I see no hands here, so I think we have something in common here. I guess that's why we're all here. So you are the key to efficiency. It all is human driven. At the end of the day, it's inside our heads what we choose to do. You're the key to change. Change is always different. They're difficult. People don't naturally like to change, and they like to change in small increments. But change is necessary if we plan to have different results. Everybody out there is trying to improve efficiency and quality while reducing costs. How are you going to do that? We must change. So together, I challenge everybody to let's get together and change the way we're doing things. Let's not just keep running down the road the same way. Now, the metaphor here, of course, or the analogy here is we have inbound and outbound automotive logistics, we'll say, these departments and with all the OEMs around the world, don't collaborate today because they don't need to. They don't have the means to collaborate today. Now this analogy here, we've got a tiny little bridge here. I think everybody knows what this image represents, and I think it's the Petronas buildings somewhere in Malaysia. Anyhow, we'd like to see multiple bridges built between these two verticals, because we think that trucks are capable of doing more than just one function. So inbound and outbound, we like to refer to it as anybound. Truck doesn't care what direction it's going and what it's hauling. And yes, today they're vehicle specific. But that can change and should change. Anybound, that should be the new terminology that we use. Make this equipment run wherever it's running with a load on, not blowing smoke in the air for nothing. Now, before anybody starts thinking that I'm giving a lesson in sex education, that's not what this is. These two, the bird and the bee, of course, they have another function here, and it's to carry pollen. And they both do it. They don't even know they're doing it. They're just looking for food, but they happen to be serving a common purpose. And I equate it to exactly what we are talking about here, to try to cross-pollinate inbound and outbound, and perhaps general freight as well. Every OEM plant has product coming in the front end of the plant, or the back end, whatever, and then product going out off the assembly line on its way out to the customer. Now, imagine if we could somehow collaborate with general freight or inbound parts and use common equipment. And design the system, design the network to make this a seamless operation. We have the ability today. The technology exists. There's evidence of it all over the world, and I think everybody can mentally visualize this. But how do we do it? What are the key steps? How do you actually make it happen? I think that's where the challenge is today, still. So that's what we're working on. Our friends from Inform in Germany sharing the vision with us, and they're helping us with analytics tools where we can take all of your automotive outbound data that's available to all of us and then compare it to all the inbound flows and understand the relationship of those. Most OEMs, I challenge the OEMs to tell me what that relationship is. And everyone we've encountered so far will tell us we don't know what it is because we've actually never done an in-depth study. Now, the tool that we've developed actually can provide some basic information about what every plant is shipping out and what they're shipping in, and provide this comparison. So then you could at least have that basis from which to work on and say, okay, well, those trucks going in that direction, maybe they can pick up engines coming in, or tires, or windshields, or who knows what. That truck should be doing some work. It's being paid for. No reason that it shouldn't be taking advantage of an opportunity like that. If all of our flows were more balanced, there'd be no need for this discussion. But we all know that automotive flows are not balanced in full at all. So we need to do this intelligently. We have to do it in a scalable fashion as well. So collecting the data, understanding the data, and then creating some strategy from that. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You're all familiar with that as well, I'm sure. Where if we could combine all of these networks, that perhaps we could come up with something far more efficient than exists today. Versatile hardware, multi-purpose, whatever you want to call it. We call it convertible trailers in our company, of course. But it's not just road trailers. There's additional applications. There's rail solutions out there in the world today. There's collapsible containers in this world today. The return of empty containers, it's a hidden cost. Everybody says, oh, well, we got the best price, it's very cheap. But actually delivering an empty container back to wherever it's going, same cost as bringing it in, but it's blended in the cost. But we have to change the game, the base game. So again, can a collapsible container work? Perhaps so. We need to try. That container, by the way, does exist in the world today. It's been in operation for 3 years, and it's working well. And it is saving money. So we see this as a part of the future as well, along with the multi-purpose trucks. Now, we specifically put this slide in here because we do want to talk about the mindset of the industry today. Everybody thinks in their own terms today. They have specific jobs, their job descriptions are all outlined, and boy, we don't want to get outside those parameters, or maybe our career is on the line. We need specifically people to start thinking outside their existing job descriptions, develop new job descriptions that involve collaboration with people on the other side of the aisle, other side of the building, or maybe they exist in different cities even, but they need to collaborate. So if we can provide the hardware that can allow for that collaboration, we believe that there's an opportunity to make that successful, cross-pollinate. But you need specific people. I put in here specifically some young people, so nothing against all you old folk like myself, but the young people, you're the ones that are going to make the difference. We need fresh vision, fresh ideas, new energy, and somehow not have the reluctance to change the status quo. So hardware and software, analytics, specialized team and processes, we believe can amount to something brand new in this industry and deliver what everybody's here looking for. That's improved efficiency and quality perhaps too, and reduced cost. Turn and burn, yeah, everybody's familiar with that. We want to change that adage to turn and earn. Better profitability for transport companies who are already running a very thin line, a very skinny margin. We can change that collectively. Collectively, we can unlock the potential. It's sitting right in front of us. Just got to do some things differently. So that's the conclusion of my presentation. I appreciate your attention to this matter. And all of you that keep coming to this presentation, it's encouraging to me. We are gaining traction in various marketplaces today. OEMs are paying attention, transport companies are paying attention. It's a slow process, and we're building new road. We've never traveled down this road before, so it's a bit more difficult, but it can be done. And there's multiple components to this solution. And we're not the expert of all of them. You guys are, and collectively we are. So it's up to us what we choose to do in the future. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, Bill. Good to hear what you're up to with your CTM model. Again, trying to change the industry a little bit, and we're still trying to hammer the message home. But it's good to see that it's developing and gaining traction quite globally as well, which is good. Next up, we're going to hear about some of the things that will perhaps influence finished vehicle logistics in the future, some new ideas, or what's already or going to be happening in the industry and how it will impact our work. To present this, we've got someone who actually worked for Penske for about 15 minutes. But before that and after that has been the Assistant Vice President of Automotive Sales and Marketing for BNSF Railway, David Fleenor.
Yeah, I thought I was going to have to report some great news, or maybe not so great news. Mr. Buffett's a good owner, and I'm not sure about Penske, but I'm Dave Fleenor, responsible for automotive sales and marketing for the BNSF, and don't worry, I'm not going to talk about the polar vortex today. What I'm here to talk about is that 2016 is a great year to be in the automotive business, but there are winds of change on the horizon. As we all know, technology can be very disruptive to our businesses. This is sort of a brief history of musical delivery systems. So you look out in the far left, there's AM radio, and then our friends in the automotive industry developed the in-45 RPM record player. That was kind of short-lived. And then they moved to the 33s, and then Probably a lot of folks in the audience don't recognize some of these things like 8-track tapes, and those got improved on, became cassettes, and then CDs. And then I remember when I got my first Apple iPod, I was just amazed because I still have my peach crate from college with the 100 records in it. And, it's like this heavy, and it's really cumbersome. And, you have a little thing like this that holds 10,000 songs. It's pretty cool. And now, obviously, the smartphones are the way of the future right now. So the thing I would say, though, this technology has been very evolutionary, very disruptive, changed the way a lot of we do things. But at the end of the day, there's still musicians. There's still people that make the music. We're still listening to the music. How we get it is a lot better, a lot more efficient. But overall, things have not changed that significantly other than the delivery system. Okay, you're all looking kind of puzzled. Does anybody remember this movie? Raise your hands and, Mr. Brian Smith. This is Sleeper. This is Woody Allen's. I think it's his second movie. And he had a vision in 300 years we would have autonomous vehicles that drove us around. Minor part of that movie. And it's 2016, and autonomous vehicles are really very close to becoming a reality. There's Louis reading his stock market portfolio on the way to work. I think this is a really interesting quote. Bill Gates said this in 1996 in his book. So we overestimate what's going to happen in 2 years, but we underestimate what's going to happen in the next 10 years. And this is a very hot topic. I mean, it's in the Wall Street Journal every day. You see all kinds of new entrants. You expect the OEMs to be playing in this space about autonomous vehicles and in ride sharing. So you see all their names. I'd say without exception, they're all expecting to have fully autonomous vehicles on the road in 5 years. But you also see a bunch of new entrants in there. The folks at Google and NVIDIA, Apple, there's big money in this. And you ask yourself, is this because they're going to come up with a better cab company? And really, you got to think this is a lot bigger than just that. So this little Google car may simply be the most disruptive piece of technology in our lifetime. So you think about the impacts of that. If we're talking about ride-sharing cars that can drive themselves, that has tremendous implications as you think out down the future. First off, if you're in a ride-sharing autonomous vehicle, you no longer have to park at the airport or search for a parking spot downtown. So this industry will feel the impact of self-driving cars. Self-driving cars can obviously be electric. The fuel cell technology, I know one of the things that is a real issue with us in Texas is we have lots of gas stations. We have no hydrogen fuel stations in Texas. So if you want to buy a fuel cell car, that's a real obstacle. But if I'm a fleet operator, if I'm somebody like a Lyft or a Uber, I can do electric fuel cells and depend on hydrogen. So are we going to need gas stations on every corner? There's 120,000 gas stations in the U.S. Car insurance, if a car goes from being a good to being a service, we no longer have to go out and buy car insurance on our own. So that industry is subject to pretty significant change. And then there's a lot of others. I mean, as many as you can think of, but who needs to rent a car when it just shows up when you press it into your smartphone? Okay, here's the supply chain today. Depending on where it's going, you have the OEM factory. It either moves out on truck or rail. We take it to a big auto facility where we give it to our partners, and then they deliver it to the dealers, who then, the consumer comes and picks it up. So how much of this supply chain is subject to disruption over the next 5, 10, 15 years? Well, all of it. this industry is going to see some significant changes. Starts with the consumer. This was an interesting stat I saw, is that in 1983, 92% of 16-year-olds in the US had a driver's license. 2014, 30 years later, it's down to 24%. So that whole dynamic of wanting to be in a vehicle has changed. Well, wanting to own and drive it yourself has changed. People are happy to be driven in the vehicles. One of the other things I think is indicative of this is the last top 100 song on Billboard that was auto-centric was 1984. It was a song called Drive by the Cars. But there hasn't been one in 30 years. And then the other thing, that quote down below, obviously the president of Lyft has somewhat of a self-interest in seeing driverless cars grow, but private car ownership goes away in the next 10 years at all the major cities. That is a big deal. That is a possibility, and thinking about that, that is a big deal to all of us in the room. Here's a thought starter. Most of us have 1, 2, 3, 4 vehicles. Average utilization of that vehicle is around 5%. If your utilization of a private car goes to 10% because you're using ride sharing, do we need half as many cars sold in the US? I mean, there's a lot of factors in there. Maybe the number of trips go up. Maybe the number of uses for vehicles. I mean, I'll give you an example. You're 10 years from now, you're at home and you're going to go to work and you call, you dial up Uber, they come and get you. Well, on the way, Uber stops at McDonald's, picks up breakfast, brings it to your family. You hand them the burger, the egg and muffin, and then off you go. So this has the capability to really change the world. And if the number of car sales is affected, and I mean, this could definitely affect it going forward, that has significant implications for all of us. And now looking from a rail perspective, this is an auto rack. That's what we haul vehicles around on. There's 60,000 of those in the nationwide pool. Represents about $10 billion in investment by all of the railroads. They have a 50-year life. So if in 10 years the number of vehicles sold is significantly less than it is today, these 50-year assets, well, they're really not good for much else than hauling automobiles. They're really good for that, but not much else. So that's a concern. This is one of our facilities in Chicago. It's 100 acres out there of parking for vehicles. Do you need a 100-acre facility if the vehicles can drive themselves? If the vehicle drives itself directly to a consumer, does it bypass the dealer? I mean, the Tesla business model, that's obviously a sign of things to come, possibly. The way we do distribution today, I showed you earlier on the supply chain, this kind of shows it more focused on Chicago, but today we bring all of our customers into one ramp, 100 acres there in South Chicago, and then our haulaway partners carry those away to dealers across, 5 or 6 states. Well, in the future, we may not need that 100-acre facility for automobiles. We may need 5, 10, 15 little facilities that basically unload themselves every day, and those vehicles depart immediately and they go into the Lyft system, they go into the Uber system, they go direct to your garage. But they don't need to sit on our facility for 3 days or more. So that has tremendous implications. And the one thing, for those of us, and I see several folks from the rail industry in here, automotive is the single most capital-intensive business in the rail business. We have facilities and cars that are very expensive. So, thing I'd like to close with, I don't have any answers, but I think there's a lot to think about here, is that this was a futurist, and you're always curious about futurists, but they say 65% of kids entering grade school today will be working in jobs that haven't even been invented yet. So that should give you hope. The world isn't changing for the worse necessarily. And then this morning, Mr. Bavenzi from GM expects more change in the next 5 years than we've seen in the last 50, and it is coming. And so we better be ready for it. We cannot expect the next 10 years to look like the last 10 years. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. I'm not sure if I've heard some very interesting statistics over in the last morning and now this afternoon. They're very interesting. I'm not even sure if they're frightening, and maybe they are kind of frightening, some of the things that I'm hearing about, but they're definitely interesting. You know, what you said about drivers and, you know, how many people have got a license is kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure if it should be frightening or if it's good. If we're going for autonomous vehicles, then it kind of makes sense. But it is interesting, and to see how it will really impact the automotive logistics industry, finished vehicle logistics industry as well. So thank you very much, Dave, for a very interesting presentation. Next up, to hear a little bit more about the technology, perhaps the information side, I'd like to welcome to the podium Lindsay English, Director from Rubicon VLS. Lindsay. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So for those of you who don't know, ICL, Rubicon are web-based data visibility companies. So ICL is the technology partner with web-based tools for track and trace of vehicles, invoice auditing, et cetera, and Rubicon is the 3PL complement to ICL. So when I was invited to speak today on the topic of technology and innovation, of course I wanted to talk about data visibility and how that ties into innovation. And we've heard some great presentations so far about really big dynamic changes coming up in our industry. What I want to talk to you about today is some of those small incremental changes that we can make every day in our jobs and should be making every day in our jobs, so that in this period of relative calm in transportation in North America, we're prepared for whatever the next crisis is when it comes. So today we're going to talk about what is waste, or my opinion of what waste is, and more importantly, what are some different strategies for how we can use data to direct our waste reduction efforts to pull those inefficiencies out of the supply chain. So the two most prominent ways that waste shows up in transportation is either extra time waiting, vehicles sitting in a yard not being delivered, or over-processing. The vehicle's double-handled and it doesn't need to be. These are both things that we can really quickly pull out days of transit by focusing on every step of that supply chain that Dave put up on the screen. So between each of those handoffs, there's an opportunity for some sort of delay to occur. And you can pull out like days in certain routes by looking at the data and letting that guide you to where your focus needs to be. Status quo thinking about continuous improvement waste reduction is it saves time, it saves money. What I want to focus on today is more about the variability. So this ties into some of our conversation with the dealer this morning around inconsistency in transit time getting vehicles delivered. And what I'm going to do is talk through a specific example about ETA accuracy and how we use data to guide how we find inefficiencies in the network around ETA. So status quo thinking, we generate an ETA. Maybe the ETA is based on a projected transit standard. Maybe it's based on some historic performance, or maybe there's just a generally accepted time frame. Cars should be delivered within 30 days, something like that. The challenge is to generate an accurate ETA initially and to dynamically recalculate that ETA as the vehicle moves. As Dennis mentioned, the key is to get it moving. And that ETA can and should be recalculated in transit. The other thing that is interesting when you start doing ETA analysis is I think, as logisticians, we do a really good job of looking at segmented performance. So you sit down with your railway and you look at the start and end time that you've agreed to measure for the railway, and you do the same with the trucking company. But there's all these gaps in between that when you do that kind of performance and sort of contractual scorecarding, you're not addressing. When you start to look at ETA, you really start to find all those gaps between the handoffs that aren't measured in conventional scorecarding. So this is an illustrative example of some of the data that we look at, how we look at it, and the conclusions we draw and the next steps we take. So this is an ETA variance graph, the green being what the good ETA VINs are. And the bars representing the number of VINs that fall in each of those buckets. So the greens are, they're arriving within a couple days plus or minus of the original dealer ETA. The yellow being a few days on either side of that, and then the red being the outliers. And in this particular example, the problem is actually that we've got VINs arriving too early. So the dealer is getting an ETA telling them the VIN's gonna be there 5 days from now. It's consistently arriving 2 days from now. So that's very general. Now you need to drill into that data and start to prioritize where you look next at where the outliers are occurring. So this is an example of how we would graph that data. Each of these dots represents a route, OD pair. So dot E looks like the biggest outlier. On the bottom of the graph, I've got that average days variance. It's at, I think, 5.3 days variance above what it was originally projected to be. Dot A actually isn't that far off. It's just greater than -3 days. So it's not that far outside the range of what good would look like. But the sheer volume of dot number A draws our attention to work that specific problem. It also ties in with when we looked at the graph of all vehicles, the problem that we were trying to solve was that vehicles were arriving too early. So the answer is that we work both of them. In this particular instance, for the vehicles arriving too early, we would work dot A, even though it's not that much of an outlier. The amount of vehicles being shipped draw our attention closer. So we drill into it in greater detail. You can look at it by day of week, by dealer code, by service providers, by facilities, by model. And you come up with a range of root causes. Now, what I want to highlight again is if you're only measuring your supply chain network by looking at carrier scorecarding for what your contracted standards are with your railways and your truck carriers and your ocean carriers, you're only going to find 2 of these things that are on our list of root causes. Transit time delays. You're not going to find things like missing ASN records. You're not going to find delays in the releasing and baying process. You're not going to be drawn to look at load mix unless your truck carrier tells you that that's what the problem is. You've got no visibility on the dealer hours piece. So we collect all of those root causes that are identified, and we order them, and we start to work them. Of course, the point here is that they're all interrelated, but also that there's takeaways for everybody in the supply chain. So, some of these around transit time delays are follow-ups for the vendors physically handling the cars. There's some follow-ups for the OEMs around, missing ASNs, around, doing some more analysis around load mix. Maybe your procurement decision changed the truck carrier's ability to service the business mix they had previously. And most importantly, data timeliness, because for example, if a release message isn't being sent in time, if you're batching it at the end of the day, then that truck carrier is going to lose a whole day where they could have built it into a load to deliver it. Those inefficiencies are so easy to pull out of your network because it doesn't take some big change that needs executive approval. It just takes hard work looking at the data. So the call to action today, the next crisis is around the corner, whether it be Mexico or changing consumer demand or people not buying cars at all, whatever happens with the weather this year. So I think now, when we've got some relative calm in the industry, is the right time for us to all be collaborating on this activity together. Not just so we can achieve those results now, so our networks are clean and waste-free when the crisis comes, but also so that when it does come, we've got a common set of tools that now we're looking at. So now we've got a tool where we're looking at dealer hours, we've got a tool where we're looking at load makeup together, and we've got a common language to analyze those problems together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, and very much what we were talking about earlier in the previous session about sharing information better to try and eliminate waste and keep the customer happier. Next up, I'd like to invite the vehicle maker on the panel to share some of his views and thoughts. I'd like to welcome to the podium Guillaume Quentin from Nissan. Thank you.
All right, so looks like you're gonna see my picture only. There's no beautiful slides we've seen before. On the agenda of the program, you see a name with Nissan is Scott Miles, who had to stay in Tennessee. So I'm the backup solution, hopefully a good one. So Guillaume, Quentin, the US version, French, so bear with my French Tennessee accent, and based in US for 2 years, been in Finnish vehicle for 8 months now. So I'm probably not the most experienced guy in Finnish vehicle in the room, but we'll manage that. And we'll try to give you, some of what's my view on what's innovation. I'm not saying that Nissan is doing a lot of innovation, there's no doubt about it. Are we at the top level in terms of logistics innovation? I'm not sure, there's definitely some things to do. So kind of my speech is around that. Being the last one is kind of challenging. After the session this morning as well, I'm like, should I get that out of my speech because it's kind of duplicated twice or 3 times already, but we'll try to go with that. So network design, network design is, of course, complex, distributing cars, many people involved, but it's not that overly complicated as well, And we don't have any very fancy tool to do it. Excel is a pretty good one, actually. And we have to admit as well that we are not changing. We've been mentioning about disruption, but for the last decades at least, we've not been changing our networks that much. So it's pretty steady. It's based on business rules, based on contracts that we have as well. So kind of go over those network changing step by steps, and that has been like that for decades. But there's a lot to come, definitely. So primary focus is customer. Got the feeling to hear myself twice. But no. Primary focus is customer, quality, and you don't have to ignore cost as well. So cost is something that we look at in regards to customer service, added value, quality. We want to optimize the network. We want to do it at the right cost to make sure that at the end, we make the customer happy, and we deliver a car which is perfect, I would say, as perfect as we would like, because unfortunately, it's never perfect. But we want to deliver a perfect car in perfect state. But it's definitely, challenging. Companies' business rules, history, system is there. I faced just an example a few days ago, kind of realizing that we are producing the Rogue in 3 different sources. It's not US, it's for US market, but actually we are producing it for US market in US, in Korea, in Japan. You're speaking about 3 production systems. There's even 2 companies involved. Systems are not communicating with each other, or not completely communicating with each other. And within that scheme of, okay, we need more cars, US customer loves the Rogue. We've been, setting up the system, but kind of forget that it might be good actually to look for delivering a car, if it's the same one, instead of delivering a car from Japan to Tennessee, and delivering the same car pretty much at the same moment from Tennessee, Smyrna to California, you might better deliver the Japanese version to California and the Tennessee version to the Tennessee customer. Pretty basic logistics concept. But when you don't have it in your system, you're like, okay, what do we need to change? And that's pretty, you're facing the structure of the system itself, business rules, and so on. So is that innovation? I don't know, that's optimization, that's for sure, but we kind of need to look at it. So there's a lot of internal innovation, working with sales, working with R&D to be able to kind of capture optimizations, capture, we don't want logistics to be the last leg on which, every other issue upstream falls off, basically, and you are the last leg dealing with any other issue. So you want kind of try to be added value, bring challenge upstreams as well, so challenge the cost aspects, the TDC, total delivery cost, upstream, kind of try to identify how you can change the process for better service, for better efficiency. We want collaboration with the carriers. We had sessions earlier, a lot of stuff going on with carriers, e-pods, EBOL, and more on their car transportation practices. And we want as well to be able to kind of integrate, so collaborate better with them, to be able to make the final customer happier, basically, and leverage their innovations as well. So don't work in silos. 3PL is the same. We expect from our 3PLs to bring innovation to OEMs, bring ideas, collaborate with us. Don't stay stuck in your contracts, basically. Come with us, come with ideas. Connect the dots as well. 3PL, we expect them to be the link between carriers, between technologists, and so on. So come with us. Technology company, definitely want to hear from you guys. Bring new ideas. See, how disruptive you might be, how forward-thinking you might be thinking as well. And we might not be at that stage yet because we are facing our daily challenges and trying to deliver the cars that we need to deliver for the end of the year, which might be the primary focus, and kind of forget to think a bit further down the road, basically. We love collaboration. I love collaboration with other OEMs as well because we are facing the same challenges. So I guess there's a lot of value into that. That's kind of a way to innovate, collaboration, basically, innovation, authorities as well. We need those guys to, the FAST Act was a powerful one. We need more as well. We're trying to work in Mexico. There's a lot of challenge with theft. How do we manage to work together between OEMs and between authorities as well to reduce, to put a limit, basically, to this challenge. So hopefully trying to bring innovation through this collaboration. It's always challenging because companies kind of expect an immediate return on investment. And we've got all these cross-functional activities to lead different KPIs. The silo logic is still there to some extent. So we need to bridge the gap if there's any gap. And then one of the challenges we face is indeed, when the system is not broke, why do you want to change it? So that's kind of the challenge in our daily life. A few comments on the buzzwords because we are speaking about innovation. I wanted to start with one. It's going to referring to Bill, basically. Backhaul, old subjects, I would say. So we look at internal backhaul. That's the ones we have control with, try to optimize our flows. On the vehicle side, merging the inbound side starts to be difficult, Well, looked at it, not saying that's a bad idea, Bill, definitely not. The challenge is you might not have the right connections, the right flows to be able to bundle it yourself. So how do we leverage basically other OEMs, get the larger picture, and we might have somebody else inbound flows combining pretty well with, Nissan outbound flow. That would be nice. And, we're looking at backhaul with other OEMs as well, and I'm kind of dreaming of any OEM having, a plant in LA, California, or New Jersey, and a big market share in Tennessee. That would be very lovely to be able to kind of optimize empty miles. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. So a lot of actions on this side. I wanted to speak about RFID as well. Well, we are looking at it. So it's kind of an innovation that's an old, probably you were speaking about those kind of subjects 10 years ago already, about RFID. We've never seen it, I don't think, emerging on the outbound side. We are looking at it. There are still benefits to that for sure, especially if you've got some sub-optimized yard management. So there's value into it. There's value into connecting with your carriers as well. There's even some kind of investments as well, entry ticket. So how do we leverage that? And sometimes it's not always obvious. And kind of the challenge for RFID, I would say, is that everybody's looking at telematics. And is telematics going to kind of supersede that technology as well? That might be a good substitution. Good or bad, I would say. We, at least as Nissan, we look at it. You might have GPS on most of the cars, but the systems in the car are not yet equipped to basically communicate with you and tell you my positioning and any kind of information you would like from telematics. So it's not yet there. And we're still working on it, definitely. Now, you had a great forward-thinking speech on autonomous drive. So Nissan is working on those cars. When I look at it, indeed, maybe need to find another job because the cars will deliver themselves. So, but the challenge is that you all need to find another job. So that might be a challenge for everybody. But it's definitely, it will be driven by customers. And kind of piggybacking on this previous presentation, the challenge is that young guys customers now, you look at retail industry, they want to have the choice, the freedom of choice, the freedom of the place. So they want to purchase their, I'm going to take an example like shoes on Zappos, and they're going to order 10 pair of shoes, get them delivered, try them, send back, all right, maybe not 9, they're going to send back 8, and here we go. So if you apply that to the automotive industry, what does it mean for us OEM, for the dealer network as well, in terms of relationship? How can we indeed make sure that we give a chance to the customer to test the car and do the purchasing process anywhere, when he likes, basically. So how do we get structure on, how do we, as logistics, supply chain, how do we support that move as well, from a technology standpoint, from a process standpoint, to make sure that the customer is going to be able to experience this purchase process. Might not be the final customer as well, but definitely there's a lot of logic that we need to change compared to the way we are running our companies those days. And that's the way I see it as well. And you might need, a keyword might be segmentation as well, because it's going to be an incremental process. So you might still have your mainstream flow going the way we've been managing logistics for decades. And the new way, the new approach for some of your model lines, some of your customer base. So that's the way we look at it. And indeed, we need big systems, big engineers to manage this big data approach. There's a lot of challenge, and I look at it, even from a Nissan standpoint. When you look at systems, we are still running a lot of process in systems which have been developed in the 80s. So what does it mean in terms of integration? It's pretty poor. How do we go to the next level? And it's challenging. You're running your entire company based on systems for several years. So how do you get to the next level? How disruptive, basically, the process needs to be forced to go to the next level. So that's kind of one of the challenges with technology itself and with those, I would say, age system. And I know that in parallel, there's another session with young guys, I would say. And how do you attract young guys and show them the first screen in your office, and it's old black and green screen, and you say you need to enter the number in the cells, and can I download it on my app? No, there's no app. So it's going to be a challenging road going forward. What's pretty sure is that we are pretty bad in predicting anyway. So we're all making nice plans, and we'll probably meet in a few years down the road, and we'll have strategized around what's happening and so on, and we'll look forward and look backward, actually, and say, we had a great strategy around that. We are still working on it, definitely. A lot of value in collaboration. We have to cope with the rules that we have today, cope with the contracts that we have today, make them change slowly but surely. And I'm in a strategy role, so planning for the future, and welcome any ideas, questions in the minutes to come and in the months to come. My email works pretty simply. So here we go. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. And as one of the young generation myself, I appreciated your comments there. But, Guillaume highlighted there perhaps, more about the, how we can change and or design the network and the benefits of trying to do that. So we heard different perspectives there, which is, in fact, I suppose I shouldn't really say that. I've learned some new things in the conference, so and different things. So it's definitely opened my mind on certain things, and for sure, hopefully, it's happened for you, because the conference is not so much for me to learn; it's for you guys to learn and find it interesting. But I think we found a few things there about what the industry is going to look like in the future. Congratulations to Dave Fleenor for finding a photograph of me with my mouth open, which is really unusual because I'm such a quiet, shy guy. We looked at different technology, hardware technology, and how that can change perhaps the impact of IT and information and what can be done to do with that and how to design the network. So first of all, I'd like to, to remind you this is your session. You're part of the session. If you've got any questions, raise your hands, wait for the microphone so that we can hear you from here, and then say your name and your company name and be ready to ask the question. I'd also like to remind you that the Automotive Logistics Live app is a good way to, if you are quite shy and you'd rather do it that way, please post a question on the app, and the moderator can see those. So if you want to do that, and to show that kind of works, I've got a question here, which is there an opportunity for standardized EDI messages, starting with production in the plant, through transportation, through to delivery? How can we use the kind of standardized EDI messages to improve communication through the supply chain? And perhaps I'll start with Lindsay on that one.
Sorry, it's kind of hard to hear. The question was opportunity for standard EDI messaging in the industry?
Yeah, to use the standard kind of EDI is sort of, a recognized way of communication in the automotive industry. So is it possible to use the standardized EDI that's already out there?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that work's already been done through AIAG, and certainly, their EDI is a standard format already. That's the idea of EDI, although then each vendor that's using EDI takes it, and some of those free-form fields get used as standard fields, and it kind of gets bastardized along the way. But it does exist already, and that's where we spend a lot of our time in trying to sort of force standardization in service of each of our customers. I think maybe looking towards ePod, that's where most of the work is being done right now. So especially with the development of sort of mobile apps and predictive real time. So a truck is leaving the terminal now, can it send a message to a dealer to let them know that the vehicle's coming? That's kind of more the immediate future.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of the next step after EDI, I suppose, is this new, the Internet of Things, IIoT or telematics. What role can that play in the future of finished vehicle logistics? It's probably actually in the session on the other side where they're saying that maybe soon you'll be able to replenish the line directly from information that you get from the line, from the production line. What role can telematics or the Internet of Things play in the future of communication in finished vehicle logistics?
So I think the biggest opportunities there are for tracking ocean vessels and tracking vehicles on ocean vessels. When it's on a train, the line is relatively fixed. We hope that it's still on the train tracks, whereas the ocean seems to be where the OEMs have expressed more interest in an exact location. As well as, I think for yard inventory is one of the bigger opportunities because, a yard inventory really, to do it effectively, you do a manual physical check, hopefully on at least a monthly basis, and reconcile it with whatever's in your system, and in our case, hopefully check our system as well, so we can identify those gaps. But if you're using RFID, then you know where that car is, and you don't have to do that physical process.
Mm-hmm. Guillaume, what Nissan using the telematics that perhaps already in the car to help you in some ways in finished vehicle logistics, whether it's tracking or tracing or any other way?
No, it's kind of what I've mentioned is that not yet, basically, telematics. So it's existing on some cars, but not every car. So we cannot use it really on a broad scale and in an integrated view. So we are looking at it, indeed trying to anticipate and make sure that in this telematic approach as well as kind of the logistics impact is taken into account. Means are the R&D guys looking at, what's the potential application of telematics, what needs to be open, not open, what can we access into, so that's those kind of, we are starting to look at it, at least from an NNS standpoint, Nissan North America standpoint. But there's and we are looking, that's why we are kind of looking at the RFID solution as well, with some providers to get this kind of yard management efficiency. We have some tracking already, like event milestones through ICL, but indeed we are looking at the yard management piece when you've got 20,000 cars on a yard, which could get kind of messy. You want to kind of know where the cars are, and it could be pretty cumbersome sometimes to find the car, so we're trying to get around that as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I guess the thing I would like to add is that the more information we share to the various members of the supply chain, the better product we'll all be able to deliver. So when the trucking company can see where we're putting vehicles, when we're putting vehicles down, the better off they'll be able to pull vehicles and plan their loads as well. So the more of that communication that goes on, the more we're intertwined through the supply chain, the better we will be.
Okay. Is it fair to say that there's plenty of information in the finished vehicle logistics supply chain, but it's either fair, and that it's shared inefficiently, sometimes perhaps on purpose, where certain sectors might say, I don't want to share the information. So is it fair to say that the information is there, we just share it inefficiently, and what can be done to make sure that the information that we need is shared? I think when you're working in automotive logistics, one of the words that the A word, I call it, is Amazon. People keep saying, why can Amazon do this and why can Amazon do that and we can't do it with complete cars? When I spoke to the guys at Amazon, they said that what they think, and people who used to be in automotive and now work with Amazon say that it's our, well, I'm trying to find a polite way of putting it, we're not very good at using the data. There's plenty of data out there, but we're very poor at using it. So is that a fair point, that the data's out there, there's plenty of information out there, but we're inefficient in using it, often intentionally, where certain parties say we don't want to share the information?
I guess from an OEM standpoint, I guess it's going to vary from each OEM as well. So I guess there's OEMs which are more advanced. You're speaking about tracking, basically, of your cars from the plant to the customer. It's kind of based on customer expectations, but we know that some OEMs are advanced, means you can go on their website and you're going to know if you've ordered a specific car and you've got the VIN, you're going to know that this car is on the vessel, it's at the port, and you've got all the information, so you've got this transparency. And some OEMs will have multiple information, maybe poorly integrated, so not able to provide this kind of this holistic view on what's happening with the car through the finished vehicle process. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of information definitely on the market and flying around. I'm not sure that we are all integrating them completely properly, basically, and using them as well. You can have the challenge is, okay, what's the purpose of the integration? Are you going to use it? It's nice to know that your car is going to deliver, but what's the additional benefits that you get from it? When you look at, we mentioned earlier, you look at from, it's mostly maybe more a European practice. People are gonna go to the dealership, order a specific car, and we give them a date, which is maybe in 2 or 3 months. They will expect basically this car before Christmas break or their next holidays to get a brand new car and to go for holidays. In US people go to the dealership, they want to have the choice, look at the car and leave the dealership with it. So you've got a different approach and dynamic as well. So what's the impact of knowing tracking for the dealers compared to the customers? And you've got those kind of trade-offs that you need to do.
Well, one of the things Lindsay mentioned was the EDI messages in some of the freeform fields. We've been working closely with the haul-away carriers, and one of the things that is a problem with data is that the OEMs share the hold codes with the haul-aways, so they know not to deliver a certain vehicle to a dealer because it's on hold for various reasons. But we, as the rail carrier, we're unloading that vehicle. We don't know it's on hold. And so being able to see that data, having the OEM share it with us, will allow us to do a better job of planning our lot. And for example, if we know a car's on hold, we wouldn't put it up in the prime spot close to the haul-away loading area. We might put it in the back 40, pack park it so that we don't take up valuable capacity and use that close-in parking for the haul-aways so they can do a better job and be more efficient.
I think there's a lot of data out there. Sometimes we joke that we have too much data. But one of the biggest challenges is always that the information is only as good as the data quality behind it and the data timeliness behind it. So, that manifests in some ways that are really obvious. Like, we create a lot of graphs just to kind of like see what we can find out of the data we have, and we get this graph of dealer delivery hours out of a specific ramp, and every dealer is getting their car at noon every day, which we know isn't happening, right? So like, how do we even start to measure that truck carrier? And the example I referenced with the releasing is a real example that happens a surprising amount in North America, where information is batched, and so you get a release message at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then when the guy's done his shift at 10 o'clock at night, he goes in and enters it into the computer, and then it gets pushed out to everybody. So I think that's one of the bigger challenges, is that unless anybody's actively looking at that data quality, the data isn't meaningful anymore.
And just to react on that, it's data quality and init process. I looked at the other day somebody presenting some ePods numbers or data, and I say, okay, why is this basically driver managing to arrive at the facility, pick up the car, and depart from the facility in 2 minutes? Like, yeah, because he clicked on the 3 buttons when he left, basically. Like, okay, indeed, how do you make sure that you've got the right data so that you can do something with it? So.
Any questions from the audience? Question right at the front here first.
Thank you, the panelists. Really great information. This is a question for Lindsay. So Lindsay, I'm Mike Schober, I'm from Toyota. And what really intrigued me about your presentation is the discussion on ETAs. So Toyota has invested a lot on the service parts side, on improving ETAs to the customer for service parts. If you can imagine, we're no different than Amazon. The customer wants to know exactly when their service part's going to arrive, or the product's going to arrive, so they can plan when to be at the dealer and so forth. Everything goes really well for us until we get a backorder condition. And then everything kind of falls apart. So we've done a really good job putting in those standard lead times and those trigger points to give those updates along the way. But once something goes on a back order, then that information just goes south, those ETAs. Are you aware of any kind of predictive analytics or anything that's going into kind of that subject of out-of-stock items and how to provide some kind of ETAs that at least give some better indication of when something might arrive?
So only working on the finished vehicle sides, I have to compare it to a problem that we encountered that's really similar with ETA, which is quality holds. So just like you said, we put in the right inputs for historical performance and lead times, and then a vehicle goes on some sort of quality hold that could be, for a quick check, or it could be for a month. We don't know. How do we generate a good ETA? And each OEM customer we have wants, a different result there. Some of them just prevent the dealer from seeing it all together at that point until the car's shippable again. But there's a couple different things you can do. One, the not ideal solution is to have sort of a manual manipulation. So build tools that allow you to select. For example, if there's like a hurricane somewhere, we want to select all the vehicles that are going to the hurricane-affected region and be able to extend their ETA by 3 days. So build in tools that allow us to do that, which is sort of semi-predictive, right? At least you're doing it before the car is actually there. And then in areas where there's campaigns, so for example, we dealt with a situation where a certain group of premium model vehicles had to have an extra check during certain months of the year before they could go to a dealer, then actually just building in that specific model of vehicle would always have an extra 24 hours versus the other ones. But yeah, that is definitely our challenge as well. If you find a good answer, let me know.
Thank you. A question in the middle there, please.
Laszlo, and I'm an EMU student at Eastern Michigan University. I'm a supply chain major. And just looking at the changes in the next few years within the industry, how realistic do you think the Uberization of freight of cars how realistic do you think that is in the next 10, 15 years, using kind of a system like Uber to transport product from point A to point B? Thank you.
I kind of think that's a question they should be asking you, but I'll open it to the panel.
I didn't hear exactly, but are you asking how ride-sharing services will move freight?
Correct, yes.
You know, it's an interesting question. You just don't know the capabilities of a system like Uber or Lyft. You think about somebody like UPS, who has such great density in their system, and that allows them to be very efficient. You know, where I see it possibly melding with that would be if I'm calling for an Uber car to pick me up at 7 a.m., it may drive by a UPS distribution center, and they may drop my 3 packages in the Uber vehicle, and it comes to my house with my packages. So I see something like that. But beyond that, I used to work at Roadway Express, and one of the sayings we had, we were really forward-thinking truckers, was freight moves freight. And so the thought is, you get that density, you're able to move things more efficiently, and when you disaggregate, you introduce a lot less efficiency.
And I kind of think that the next big trend for finished vehicle logistics genuinely is going to come from the young guys in the universities and what they're up to. You know, we all know the kind of stories that if someone says what's going to be the next trend for hotels, I'm not sure anybody would have said 5 years ago Airbnb, or what's going to be the disruptor for, you know, taxi services. It'd be Uber. So I think whatever's going to be the next big trend, the real disruptor, apart from CTM, of course, the next big disruptor in the automotive or finished vehicle logistics industry, I don't think we've got any idea at all. We'll wait for some, 15, 16-year-old kid to tell us what it is. And then we'll still be here and they'll all be billionaires by the time they're 21 or something. But that's not bitter jealousy at all. But I think we've reached the end of the discussion for 2 reasons. Firstly, we genuinely have reached the end of the panel. So thank you very much for the panel for an interesting discussion. Thank you. And the second reason for finishing now is because in the coffee break room, they've got hot dogs at the moment. So please join us in the coffee break room for your coffee and hot dogs hosted by C.H. Robinson. Thank you.